today I'll be showing you how to make a black forest cake, and this is a combination of a chocolate sponge and a certain way of assembling this cake. So I'll go through the steps so you know exactly how to make it. So I'll show you what we need to actually bake the cake, and then we'll bake it. Now for ingredients, all you need is all-purpose flour, you need some sugar, vanilla essence, then you need some cocoa powder. Now to actually mix the cake, we need some tools. So we need balls, a sieve, we need a rubber spatula, and you can use either a whisk or a mixer. Now as I continue to mix the cake, you'll see exactly how I'm able to do that. I'll be using a pan in this case and grease-proof paper or parchment paper. So I'll show you how to actually prepare your pan so you can actually get started. Right, it's best to actually have maybe some cooking oil if you need to prepare your pan, and what you want to use is a pastry brush. I'm gonna move this out of the way. So I'm going to dip a little bit, get a little bit of oil, and I'll apply the bottom and also the side of the cake pan. So you want to use a pastry brush to be able to do that, and you can actually get this at TopServe. And in this case, I'm actually using a 5.5 inch pan. So this gives me about half kg, about a half kg of black forest. Now when I am preparing my pan, your grease-proof paper or parchment paper actually comes as a long sheet like this, but you want to actually take some scissors, trace, and cut the exact size of the pan. So as you can see, I've actually cut the size of the bottom of the pan here. So you want to place that inside your pan like that, and this just ensures that our chocolate sponge doesn't stick. And then you want to make a long strip. Once again, you just want to cut the length of the side of the pan. And the reason why we're using oil is so that our parchment paper actually sticks. Just want to make sure it goes round. And that's how we actually prepare the pan. Remember, you can actually get parchment paper or grease-proof paper from TopServe Limited. So once you prepare your pan, you put that aside, and you can actually start measuring your ingredients.
So what is the sure way of getting a perfect end result while baking a cake?
You want to make sure you're actually measuring your ingredients using tools that are supposed to be used for measuring. So most of the time you either want to use a weighing scale, or in this particular case we'll be using measuring cups.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to measure the different ingredients. I'll start with flour, and you want to use balls and a sieve, and I'm literally going to do it right on top here, so I can directly sieve my flour. So when you're using this cup set, which you can still find at TopServe Limited, and they actually come the cups, and then they also come with a set of measuring spoons. So when you see a recipe that says cups and spoons, these are the cups and spoons we're actually talking about. My half cup of flour. So you want to make sure you're just scooping the flour in here. You don't want to pack it in there. You can use something flat like maybe a palette knife or an icing spatula. Make sure you've leveled completely. I'll also be using cocoa powder, and I'll measure an 1/8 cup. You can also get this at TopServe Limited. So once again, you don't want to pack this, you actually just want to place it in here, level with a flat object. Now cocoa powder does tend to be a bit lumpy, but you want to try and get it as flat as possible. And then you place it on top of your flour and just mix it up. So you want to sieve this so that you can aerate your flour, and that gives you a really nice moist cake at the end. Okay, so we also want to measure sugar. So I'll be measuring a 1/3 cup. You just scoop and level. Don't pack in your ingredients, and use a flat object like a knife or a palette knife, and just place it aside. Now the other ingredients are eggs. So the other thing I'll be doing is preparing my eggs, and in this recipe I'm actually going to separate my eggs. That means putting your yolks and your whites separately. So basically what you do is you crack your egg, have 2 bowls, and this is one method of actually doing it. There's different ways you can do this. You can get an egg separator, or you can just do it manually like this. So you want to make sure your white is on one side and your yolk is on the other side. You want to make sure you don't pierce your yolk because you don't want them to mix up with the white. Now every time you do that, you want to separate the white and put it in a separate bowl, and then do that again.
Why are we separating the white from the yolk?
So when you're making sponges, you really want to make something called a meringue, which is a mixture of egg whites and sugar, and that is what's going to be our raising agent when it comes to mixing our sponge, because you'll notice there is no baking powder in this cake. So that whisking that can only happen when you mix egg whites has to happen. So you have to separate them. Whip the egg whites, gives you that aeration, and then you add in the egg yolks later. So I've put my last egg white separately. So right now I actually should be able to mix, because the only other thing I need to do is add this vanilla, but I'm going to add it while I'm actually mixing the cake. So I'll do that in a bit. So now I'll start mixing the cake. Alright, so now I'm going to whip my egg whites. So first I'll just pour them into my bowl, and then always make sure your bowl is clean. If you're unsure about how clean your bowl is, you can always wipe with a little bit of vinegar just to make sure there is no fat in there. And then I'll beat this medium to high speed until I have some soft peaks. I just want to check if we've gotten the soft peaks. As you can see, they're a bit wet. The best way to check is if you actually use your beater. If you push this out, lift, and you're able to see that they're a bit soft, but they're still wet since they're falling. So I'll just beat a little bit more, and then I'll start adding the sugar. Remember, you don't want them to get to be too stiff before you start adding the sugar either. Do is check if my meringue, which is basically a mixture of egg whites and sugar, is the right consistency. Now you don't want it too stiff, but you do want some nice peaks, and as you can see I have nice peaks right there, so this is good to go. My meringue is really nice. I'm going to now start adding my egg yolks, and I'll add one egg yolk at a time until it becomes a really nice foamy smooth mixture. Now before I finish, the other thing I'll do is for flavor, I'm actually going to add some vanilla essence, and you can get Pradeep vanilla essence from Topsav. So I'm going to put a half teaspoon to flavor my cake, and then I'll keep whipping this mixture until it's nice and foamy and it's very aerated. Alright, now when you want to check if your mixture is ready, we do what we call a ribbon test. Okay, so if you want to check if your mixture is at the ribbon stage, you want to lift using your whisk, and your mixture should actually leave ribbons on there. As you can see, you can actually see these ribbons. They're not dissolving, they're not disappearing. So this means my mixture is ready for the next step. So if your mixture becomes like water, it's dissolving, you actually need to continue mixing until you get there, because if it's not aerated, your sponge will actually deflate. So the final part is adding my dry ingredients into this mixture, and you sieve again. The reason why we're sieving so much fast is just for aeration, and second, realize that there is no baking powder in this cake, and the aeration will actually come from my mixture, so I need air at all times. I can just use a rubber spatula, and you're going to use the over and under method. Now you want to mix this. At the same time, you want to be gentle, but you also want to move fast because you don't want your mixture to actually deflate. This is actually called a foam batter, and the reason why it actually makes noise like foam. So as long as it's making a foam noise, if it actually looks like water, that's when you know that your mixture has deflated, which is not good for a sponge. Now the other thing that happens is that they tend to be air bubbles of flour and dry ingredients, so you want to make sure you get that so you don't bake your cake and there's little air spaces with flour. Okay, I've gotten most of that, so I'll add the rest. Once again, we are sieving so that we can make sure that this flour is as light as possible, and that's going to help me maintain this aeration that we have in here. So again, over and under when you're folding, and as long as you can hear that foam sound, you're good to go. I'm gonna do this one last time just to make sure I've gotten everything. You can pass your spatula to make sure you've gotten most of the flour. I'm very confident about this, so I can actually place it into my prepared pan and bake it.
So while mixing this,
yes,
I have realized you've not mixed the flour into the mixture using the mixer itself.
Yes, yeah. For this particular type of sponge, it's called a biscuit, and it's very delicate. It actually doesn't use a raising agent like baking powder, so it tends to be very delicate, and you really want to make sure you don't deflate that air. So if you use a mixer, it tends to be very strong. It might kill those air bubbles and your mixture might deflate. So there's some sponges that can use a mixer, but this particular one you don't. All right, so I'm about to pour my butter into the pan, and after I do this, I'm going to place it into the oven. Now make sure before you start baking, you've actually preheated your oven to 180 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So using a rubber spatula to actually remove your mixture is great because it actually gets most of the mixture, so you have nothing left in the bowl. So if you don't have one, make sure you get a rubber spatula from Top Serve Limited. They also have them in the kits as well, and that's my mixture. So all I'll do is actually put this into the oven for about 20 minutes, then I'll check on my cake.
How did it all begin?
Wow, I used to love baking. So baking has been a passion that I've had for so long, since I was very young. That kind of developed into a business over time. Yeah, so let me just say, I was baking, then over time I just kind of started selling cakes. Then I decided to actually get serious and start a business.
So when you began the training bit of it, what inspired you to start the training?
I started training because people were actually inquiring about training. So I was baking, and at that time I had actually a small shop, and I would sell cakes, and people would come in, they'd buy cakes, but at the same time they also wanted to know how to bake. But at the time I didn't have a capacity to actually train people. So after some time I decided to actually start training, and it became a core business to the point where at some time I was not selling cakes, I was actually only training people. Yeah. Generally it just started by the need of people learning how to bake, so I was basically doing beginner classes. So it's just basic training on how to make cakes and how to decorate basic. As we continued, those people had taught how to bake wanted to know more. So as people inquired for more training, I just kind of added on classes and skill levels as we continued. So I'm always listening to what past clients are saying.
What does training at Amari Baking Center entail?
So we have various classes ranging from different skill levels. Obviously we have a lot of basic classes for people who are starting, and we segment them based on topic. Like for example, cake making and decoration. We have pastries, we have yeast and bread classes, and some are just decoration classes. So we start with basic level class, then we take you to intermediate and advanced. So we have various classes on different skill levels. We have a hands-on training. Basically we make sure whatever it is you're learning, you are doing it yourself. You're not going to observe, you're actually going to bake the cake. If things go wrong, you actually get to see it go wrong. You take home your products. We actually have you bake your cake, decorate it, and actually go home with it.
What would you like to demystify about Amari Baking Center?
Alright, so one of the things I like to get clear on and exactly what we do. A lot of people ask if we are a college, and I like to get honest with people. We're not a college, we're actually just a private business offering vocational skills. We also get asked if all we do is theoretical classes. A lot of people tend to think that's what we're doing, and we like to clarify that we're doing hands-on practical classes.
If someone wanted to get into contact with Amari, how will they get in touch with you?
So if you want to get in touch with us, there's various ways of doing so. You can reach us via email, info@amaribakery.com. You can also go to our website, amaribakery.com as well. We're in all social media platforms. This is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. Just search Amari Baking Center or Baking with Amari. You can call us on 0701 796 688. Right, for anyone who's looking to start baking for business, or maybe even over time start training, first I'll start with the baking. If you want to bake for business, I tell you first, make sure you have understood the skill. If it's training or if it's books you need to actually read and practice, make sure you have a good grasp of the skills that you're putting out products that are good quality.
What is your specialty?
So we have a brand called Chiffon Cakes by Amari, and the only type of cake we sell is chiffon cakes. So this is a type of sponge that's really, really moist and fluffy, and it's like a really big passion of mine. So those are the only types of cakes we sell. For anyone interested, they can just go on social media and search Chiffon Cakes by Amari, and that's what we sell for now.
What challenges have you faced during the pandemic?
So the first obvious thing about us being a contact, it's a physical class. So when the pandemic happened and the first thing we were told is social distancing, we actually first had to close, just like everyone did, and reduce the number of students we are taking in, because we were taking a large number in a bit of a smaller space.
Yeah.
So that meant we had to first stop, then figure out how do we take on people but not too many people at the same time. So I think that was the first major issue. And then just being conscious of the safety thing, just kind of making sure everybody's wearing their mask and cleaning in between. So we sat down, thought how we can come up with that, how people can social distance and still learn.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, how do we make sure everyone is following protocol throughout the class the whole time. So we actually had to do like an in-house training of things you have to keep remembering to tell the students all the time. Another thing that we did was go online, because obviously with people being at home, we also realized we can take advantage of that. So we actually started offering monthly online classes, which we do until now.
Any opportunities that have come up with the pandemic as well?
So to be honest, one of the opportunities that happened at that time was that we actually had 90% of our followers online. So whatever we're posting, most people are actually able to see it. So if we're doing anything online or just putting out content, people are actually able to watch. So I'd say at least we've reached more people within like that period of time. We focus a lot of content, so we've been posting a lot of content, and that has helped our brand grow also at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 major cake flops a baker would experience in their courses.
All right, so generally we get a lot of troubleshooting problems and issues, but I'll try and pick the top 3. So one of the things that happens with cake is that maybe it's actually involved with temperature, with like we were talking about the thermometer. If your internal thermometer or internal temperature is not good, you get that your cake is maybe peaking. It sort of looks like a mountain, maybe it has cracked, and that means that the temperature was too high there. Yeah. The other thing that tends to happen a lot is cakes tend to sink, like there's literally a hole in between, like a rift valley in between, and that happens if the raising agent, something like baking powder, was too little or not measured properly. So this is where you actually need to get the right tools to measure your ingredients.
Yeah.
The third thing that also is one of those popular things that happen to beginner bakers especially is when your cake bubbles over when it's in the oven and actually pours out, like your cake batter bubbles over, and that can happen due to 2 reasons. First, maybe you actually used the wrong amount of baking powder, like there's too much in there. It also happens if you use the wrong size of pan. Like if you're supposed to use a 6-inch pan, use a smaller one, or 8-inch pan and use a 6-inch pan. So if that happens, that also tends to, you know, have your cake batter kind of bubble over and pour.
This hot pack, once you have your cake actually cool for a bit, you can actually come and tear around where the perforations are, or at least at the bottom, so you can display your cake on the same package.
Describe your most challenging baking project overall from when you started up until now.
Interestingly, the most recent, because I'd say everyone goes through a journey, so there's been many, but one of my more recent one, even though it's, let me say, something I've sort of conquered, is chiffon cake. So there's different types of cakes in the baking world, and then there's different types of sponges. So based on, you know, what it is, there's a certain way you're supposed to mix them and it should give you a certain result. So I had been struggling with chiffon cake for the longest time, because it needs a specific pan, a specific way you mix it, then you have to bake it at the right temperature, even cooling is specific. Yeah, so that has been so far a challenge for me for baking, that is.